You can hear 100% infield. Huge thing here. This is also on island. I mean, can you even see it 3D printed? Oh no, even play around. It's very nice. So we are in the lab. 40mm tube. Whoa. Be mine. All our different materials. How do you guys like this? I think we are live. Hello, hello. Hi everyone. Hi Noah. How are you? You forgot to unmute.
Hi. How are you?
Good. Thank you.
Nice.
It's been a really long time. I think the last stream I did was like months ago, maybe maybe half a year ago or something. So great to be back, and thank you Noah for accompanying me in that return.
Thank you for having me. It's nice.
Who do we have here? We have GamerGeek is here, Additive Atom, Nightcore is here, and then Big Bag Dalek, thank you for joining. Nicholas, I read your question during the intro. I will answer it. Jose is here, and 491 Phantom, Da Vinci. Awesome. Thank you everyone for coming. Brian also from YouTube. Oh, it's interesting. There's more YouTube. I think the Nightcore's stream has developed a little bit more the audience on YouTube, which is pretty cool. And quickly to answer your question, Nicholas, it's not the topic of today, but just to answer, I think PETCF would be a good choice. But if you go on our Discord, what I hear most is our Polymax PLA that is being used for a drone frame because of the impact resistance. But feel free to go on our Discord on the drone channel. They are always talking about what's the best material for different applications. So, how are you, Noah? Been a long time. I see you have a good inventory of spool now.
Yeah, that's a lot of filament, thanks to you. So, I'm doing fine, having fun with 3D printing.
Is that a poly dryer also? A dryer dock at least?
Yes, and
the pieces are there.
Trial boxes up there, so also well equipped with that, and they work really well.
Nice.
Can't complain about filament shortage.
And all of these filament for one printer, or did it multiply?
Yes,
or is still just one?
That one bamboo printer, but it tends to eat filament relatively quickly. So
that's true. That's true.
I think that's very sufficient for now. Yeah.
Great. So so the reason why we are doing this live stream in the weekend and not really planned is because you may have heard recently since the video from Mitch. That more and more idea that are coming about the open RFID, and obviously I saw the video and then I read the GitHub, and I thought it was nice that there is more and more people interested in this. So I thought, how about we do a live stream like we did in a good old time, where we gather a lot of ideas from the community on what they would expect. So what they would expect from an open RFID system, and what can be done basically, and how to do it. And so I was in a meeting with Noah yesterday as well, who by the way joined Polymaker as a part-time contractor. So welcome in Noah on working on all our crazy projects.
Yeah, I'm really looking forward to working even more with you. There's so many ideas, and I'm sure we'll get a few more ideas today as well.
Absolutely. And so I mentioned that I was going to do an RFID, and I know Noah also have a lot of ideas. So I thought, why not having someone to talk to so that we can engage a little bit more the audience in coming up with even more ideas. So yeah, that's basically the goal for today. And maybe a quick question to start with. Noah, why were you interested when I asked you if you're willing to join the stream? Are you particularly interested in open RFID, or what's your interest there?
Yeah, so I generally like the idea of open RFID. Well, I have a Bamboo AMS, so I used it a few times, but since most spools don't support it, and I also want to use filament that's not bamboo filament, it would be great if all manufacturers could support it. I don't like the idea of like bamboo locking it down to only their filament. And I think it would be great if there would just be a basically global solution that all manufacturers could use, and also a system that can be expanded to add even more functionality. And yeah, I think there are so many uses to it.
Yeah, I agree. And so I guess the main challenge when we're trying to make something open is basically the standards, right? So something that is open works if we all do the same, and that's usually, I'm guessing, the main challenge is how to standardize everything. I mean, even to the point where, you know, our industry have so much difficulty to standardize things, to the point where even filaments, we're still having some 2.85 out there, right? I'm hoping that we have organically made the decision that 1.75 will be the future, but I still see some development on 2.85. So we'll see. But yeah, I guess that's always the challenge: how to standardize. What do you think?
Yeah, so you can't. So yeah, you can't force people to use a standard. That's the problem. So usually the best way is to make it as easy as possible to adopt the standard, because otherwise people just won't use it. So that means there shouldn't be any cost, and it should be just easy and simple to integrate it into your current system without having to abandon what you are doing currently.
Yeah, exactly. And I think I want to highlight a point that you just said is you cannot force people, so it has to be organic. And to make it organic, you have to make it uh, in a way so useful and easy to use that it's just a no-brainer that you have to use it. So
Yeah.
and that's kind of the point of today's stream is we want to come up with a good amount of idea and having a lot of brain together from different expertise to create an ideal standard. And we're not going from scratch, right? There's a lot of work that has been done, and I want to show you guys what has been done already. But if we are a lot of people creating the standard, and hopefully we're thinking about, we have a more global thinking on how it could be used, and then make it more useful. The ease of use, I'm not sure. I'm assuming it shouldn't be too complicated. But yeah, anyway, we'll try to organize a little bit today's discussion. Have you read a little bit the what has been done so far on the Open RFID on the GitHub?
Yeah, a bit. I didn't read it that I didn't read everything, but I glanced over the page, so I saw what
Mhm.
they are doing. Basically, reverse engineering what Bamboo is doing. Um,
Yeah, exactly.
yeah,
So maybe what I can suggest is, hey, Traxman is here. Zombie, Pesleys, such a long time. Sorry, Noah, I'm just really excited to stream again and see all these names.
that's cool.
Okay, so let me move you to my side monitor, and I will get it a little bit closer so that it's not strange when I look at you. Well, still a little bit strange, but anyway, then I can share the Open RFID standard, and then we can talk about it. Okay, there you go. So this is the work that has been done already, and I will send you the link over here. Hey, Matt German, how are you? Warpaint and Unicorn, how's everything? Okay, so I just shared the link. So this is where, at least for me, this is where everything started. I saw a video online from Mitch, and then he was talking about this work that are being done, and I think they reached a milestone where they finally were able to read most of what the Bambu Lab NFC chip had, or I should say RFID tag. And so I just wanted to go over what they have found first, which I think is this one. And then so there's two important page, .md, or whatever that means. But basically here is they talk about how to read and understand an RFID from Bambu Lab. And the other one here is talking about an idea of open RFID, like how can we structure the different data, where to put the tag, etc. But we're gonna come back to this. So how knowledgeable are you with RFID, Noah? Have you code anything more about it or used it?
Yeah, so if anyone has seen the Polymaker Scientist Scanner, that you had at some fairs, like the Maker fairs that uses RFID. So it's a relatively simple system where we have an RFID scanner and RFID tags on the bottom of the scientist figurines. Yeah, that's a really basic scanner that basically inputs the tag ID as a keyboard input, which I use to find the right scientist. And that's a long time ago, but when like RFID in smartphones was a new thing, like probably 10 years ago or something, I had also NFC stickers, which I could use to trigger actions on my smartphone. I also tried writing data on it with my phone, I think. So I played a bit around with it a little bit, but I'm not really like an electronics expert, so I wouldn't know how to like build a complete reader myself or something like that. But I roughly know how RFID tags generally work.
Okay. And so maybe we can take. I completely forgot about the scientists, but yeah, of course we have worked with that before. Yeah, and maybe we can use the scientists as we go through what they have found and just use it as an example because it's a more simplistic version. So I think here they are basically explaining how RFID tag works in more in a way of how they store the data, etc. So I think in our case of the scientists, the reason why we didn't need all of this is because I think we were just using the UID of the tag, right? We were not writing anything on it. Is that correct?
Yeah. The tags were empty, and every tag comes with an ID by default. That's basically hardwired into it, as far as I know, and we were only working with that.
Yeah. So hey, NSGO, sorry, you're going to bed. Thank you for taking the time to say hi. Yes. So and apparently, so what you can do is there is already a UID, a unique ID per RFID that come from the manufacturer of that tag. But on top of that, you can write a lot of things. And what they tried to do is to read the information that was on the Bambu tag. And apparently, why it's difficult is because you don't really know how. So it's a bunch of data, and you don't know how to parse that data, and you don't know what data says what, if I understood properly.
Yeah, and on top of that, Bambu is actively encrypting it, so it's Bambu doesn't want you to read it, basically, and they made it as difficult as possible to read it. People managed to crack the encryption and find out the keys they used to encrypt, as far as I understand. So it's 2 levels of difficulty. The difficult part is cracking the encryption. But since they managed that, figuring out what the data means is a bit of guesswork, but I think with trial and error, they probably were able to find out which data block has which meaning. Yeah.
And so they have a how to contribute. And my understanding is that the more data you have, the easier it is to decrypt. It's like, when you have like the series of number, and then you have to guess the number after. Then the more number you have, and the easier it is to find the rule to guess the number afterwards. So I'm guessing it's similar here. The more data they have, the more they can find like some pattern and stuff like this, so that they know, if there is a part of the code that says 175, 285, 285, something like this, then you can guess maybe it's the diameter. I mean, even though they don't have 2.5, but Yeah, I think that's how you can contribute. It's not super easy because I think you need some type of hardware, and then you need to put it like in between the reader and the tag and try to read what's going on, and then you have to send it here. So it's not super easy, right? You have to know what you're doing, but I think they are explaining pretty well how to do that if you guys want to contribute. Are you planning to do that, or you don't have the necessary hardware?
I don't have a debugging tool. I have just a scanner, but I don't think that would be sufficient to actually contribute.
Mm-hmm.
And so something we'll probably talk about later, but the question is, does it make sense to like try to reverse engineer what Bamboo does and just work with that? Or does it make more sense to just define an own standard that's not encrypted and just easily readable?
Yeah, that's a good question. I'm guessing that was like the first part of their work is like trying to see how people are doing it right now, which is usually the first thing you do for any project, right? Instead of having an internal look and trying to figure out something completely new from scratch. I guess they were thinking of doing an open RFID, and maybe the first step is just understand how people are doing it right now, and then from that maybe coming up with some ideas. That could have been the idea. There's a few questions. So, Mr. Balloonatic, how would you plan on deploying the tag, and what innovative uses do you think could be applied to it? Yeah, that's a great question. We are going to talk about it later, but I can record it for now. How to deploy the tags, and how can it be used? So we can think about dryer, profiles, inventory management, blah, 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 blah. But yeah, that's a good question. Warpaint and Unicorn. I wonder if Creality Hyper PLA for the K2 is easier to read. Does Creality use tags?
I didn't know about that.
Yeah, I don't think they do. I wonder if Creality Hyper PLA for the K2 is easier to read. Sorry, or maybe I didn't understand the question, but I don't think Creality Spool has RFID tags. Artelius, at last a stream at EU time I can watch. Yeah, but because Noah is here, so thank you.
Yeah.
Okay, so they do have tags now. Oh, they do. Okay, I had no idea. Really?
Yeah, that's news to me as well. I didn't know.
Creality.
Because I'm on the website right now, I don't see it yet, but maybe they just didn't update the website yet.
They do now? Okay. Oh yeah, RFID filament spool finally come to Creality. RFID with Creality Print and K2. Oh, that's interesting. I have a K2 Pro and order please blah, blah about the RFID used in the filament. Will Creality Print interact with RFID information? Also, that's more a forum. Maybe there is some information here. Pre-order K2 Caribbean. You have so it's only on the Hyper PLA spool for the K2 Plus. Okay, got it. And where is it on the spool? Oh, there's a tiny. Oh, okay. Interesting. I had no idea. That's good to know. That's why we do this live stream, right? We gather all the knowledge. Is there a giveaway? No, not for today. There's a lot of giveaway going on during the week, but this is just a live stream to really talk about what can we do to. I think that's the title. A way to develop, drive. Oh, I made a typo there. How to drive innovation and improve UX in our industry, and we're going to talk open RFID. Hey, Geoffrey. More Noah for EU stream then. Okay, so what else? Blah 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 blah. So this is what you need to. I think they call this sniffing. Sniffing the tag means you check the communication between the tag and the reader, and yeah, they call this sniffing. I thought that was funny. Blah 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 blah. Then they tell you where is the reader. blah blah. Where to put your there you go. Proxmark 3 replacement for sniffing. So I thought that was interesting name. Blah 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 blah, and then they give you. So this is more to help you sniff your sniff your printer and your filament. Blah 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 blah, and then at the end, so they use all the data they have sniffed, and then so they already, how do you call that, decrypt some parts, so they know that. So it's divided in block, if I understood properly, and then the block 0 is the manufacturer data, and then tray info, filament type, blah 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 blah. And it seems that there is some more blocks that they are trying to, they are trying to figure out apparently. I think that's it. So as an example, maybe here, block 4, it's a string of 16 characters, and it's the detail about the filament type. And right now, what they have found is PLA Basic, PLA Matte, PLA Silk, PLA Galaxy, etc., etc. So so I think that's the work they have done. They are now able to read Bamboo RFID. Okay, yes. So for me, the important part is this one. Is after doing all of that work, and by the way, they have a Discord already with a few hundred people, I think, and that's where they do all the work, and they share some ideas. And with all that work, they got some experience, and I'm guessing with that experience, they started to think about a good open source RFID standard. So that's how I understood it. And then so there's a couple of filament manufacturers, some hardware that are let's say interested. They're backers, meaning they back the idea, which most likely means they will implement that standard when it's once it's out. So maybe let's brainstorm a little bit on that part. How RFID can be what can it be useful for? Noah, do you have some ideas?
I mean, the obvious that we already have is like automatically setting the right filament in the printer and slicer.
Okay, filament.
That's what Bamboo is doing already.
Filament information to the slicer. So there's some ideas, and we're talking about some basic one, like let's say profiles, colors, and stuff like this, right? Yes. I heard also some good ideas. It was the dryer. Like you would put the spool in the dryer and you would click dry. You don't need to choose the level, the temperature, the time, whatever thing. You just click dry, and then it would read basically what is on the RFID.
Really good idea.
Drying information for dryer, for example. Any other ideas?
You also mentioned stock keeping, like inventory.
Management. That's good. Also, you can think about if you guys remember, we made a partnership with Spool Stock, and Spool Stock is currently, when they released, it was about manually putting the information. So this is Poelite PETG, black, blah 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 blah, right? And the second version, you could scan the UPC. You could scan the UPC on the box. The problem is there's no UPC on the spool, and except Noah, apparently, that is keeping the box. The majority of people are not keeping the box.
Yeah.
And maybe version 3 is you just tap your phone on each of your spool, tap 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 tap, and then you already record everything. So yeah, that's a great other ideas. Let me catch up a little bit with the chat. Yes. Nicola is giving away knowledge. That's the giveaway today. Creality actually has RFID reader in their new CFS and also on the side of the K2 Plus itself, where the spool holder is. That's great. So that means they are coming with RFID. So hopefully we can have that standard before that, right? Because if we have already too many companies with their own RFID standard, let's say, it's even harder, because this huge company, once they release something, to change it is a nightmare, right? So we better have something before. What telemetry and specs are transferred? Does it go as far as diameter variation and physical properties, or just material properties? You can check the link I just sent, but I will send this VASCNC. I will send the link again. But basically, sorry, I sent you the wrong link. You can just go to README. But basically, what they have so far is things such as filament type, detailed filament type. So yeah, so whether it's PLA, ABS, PTG, and then out of the PLA, what type of PLA, and then what else? Spool weight, color code, filament diameter, temperature, and drying info. So the drying temperature, drying time, etc., bed temperature, max temperature on the hot end, minimum temperature on the hot end. What else? XCAM info, nozzle diameter. That's interesting. Or maybe if it's like a glitter filament, then you need a bigger nozzle.
Minimum nozzle diameter. Yeah, that makes sense.
Yeah. Spool width, production date and time, filament length, short production date and time, extra color info. So that's so far what they have on their tag. Sniffing equipment is illegal in the UK. Okay, that's good to know. If each roll has a unique spool ID, it would be great to record how much filament has been used, so it can further help with product management. Yeah, at least that would be predict if I need to have a new spool ready to go, or if I can start a new print. Yeah, you can imagine like there is RFID technology that can scan like a few meter. Like for example, when you go on the highway, and then they scan your the tag that is on your windshield, then it's a few meters, right? So you can imagine having one like let's say like in Noah's room under his desk, there is like a kind of reader that always know what you have in your inventory, and then you also know what is in your printer and everything. So you can go on your app and you know exactly everything that you have, and maybe with some smart ideas you could know how much filament there is on each spool and stuff like this. So I'm thinking we only came up with 3 so far, but I'm sure having this information somehow will make life so much easier.
Yeah. So one idea I also had is generally you already put a profile into the list, but you could extend the system further of like the idea I proposed to you as well, putting onto the RFID tag a web URL that points to an API where the slicer could, for example, pull the actual printing profiles for different printers or the complete TDS. And if you put an API URL and a filament ID onto the tag, then you could basically connect unlimited amounts of data to that spool, regardless of the capacity of the tag. Because if you try to put the whole technical data you have for your filaments, that probably wouldn't fit on one tag. So that way you could provide a way to pull more information about the spool if necessary. And for example, the Bamboo printers and many new printers already have Wi-Fi. So if you could even directly on the printer pull additional info on the filament, or you do it in Slicer, for example.
Yeah, that's a good idea. And actually, we'll come back to this, because there is indeed some limitation in terms of what information you can put. So we'll have to come up with some ideas on how to make it work, right? And one idea that Noah just said is to have an URL, and then instead of putting all the information on the tag, then you put it on the cloud, basically internet. Spoolstock just released news about working on integration into Slicer to keep track of filament usage out of your inventory. Yeah, I mean that's what I love, right? I'm a big fan of smart home where you connect everything together. Then this is the same, right? If you have the spool, the slicer, your computer, basically your phone, the filament management system, your inventory system. If everything is connected, then it's well, first of all, it's so cool, and second of all, it makes it so much easier to use, right? Hey, Bearded Printer, thank you for coming. The 3Heaven is here as well. Thank you for coming. Yeah, because Sparkle does not like 0.2. Yeah, definitely. How is everything? The 3Heaven. He received a dual an ADEX printer, and he's making a lot of composite printing, which I really like. I like the composite printing, like flexible and rigid, let's say. I was thinking if the software on your computer knew that you loaded a new 1 kg filament spool, but the slicer knows that this print is going to use 350 grams, so there is 650 grams left. What I heard, I had a talk with the with that community that have developed the first open RFID standard, and what they said is if you can put the core diameter of your spool in the RFID, and then if the filament system is able to know, like I scan the tag, and then it does a 360 degree, and then I scan it again, then I know how much filament did I pull during this 360, and if I know the core diameter, then I can estimate how much filament is on the spool. Does that make sense?
Yeah, that's interesting. Yeah. So regarding the comment, Bamboo is already doing like the calculation. So the Bamboo slicer or printer, I'm not sure where they store it, remembers the spool ID, so each unique spool. And if you print something that takes like 250 grams of filament, it remembers you removed 250 grams of filament from that spool. And I think that's actually already relatively accurate. I'm not sure if it takes like purging and stuff like that into account, or if you break off a piece of filament, of course, the slicer won't know about that. But that's just something we have to live with. I'm not sure how accurate the measuring the rotations would be, because, of course, the radius of the filament changes depending on how many layers of filament are currently on the spool. Like the inner windings are shorter than the outer windings by a lot, so you would
that's I think that's the main
estimate.
The main uncertainty is how good the winding is. I mean, not how good, but what type of winding. If it's like a very dense winding, if it's not a dense winding, then Vaciency is saying inventory management is the most exciting for me, and integration into the slicer and printer, so everyone is speaking the same language for setting optimization and user tracking. Yeah, I really do believe. For me, there's two main objectives for let's call it open standard RFID. So the two objectives for me is number one, drive industry innovation, because you see all the idea you guys are coming up with. That's for me driving industry innovation. You are offering a bunch of information that are now open and accessible on your spool, and I'm sure Spoolstock is going to start developing something. The printer manufacturers are going to develop something. All the accessories around the printer are going to develop something. We may end up with a new spool rack that you put on the wall, and somehow a reader that can read a row of filament. Like, that's driving innovation for me. So that's the objective number one, is having all of this information open to everyone. It is driving industry innovation. And number two is UX improvement. So the user experience can be drastically improved. The same way Bamboo Lab has proved it with their system. The fact that you put a spool, it knows the color, it knows the profile, it prints right away. Just imagine that, but with all the 3D printer, with everything. Then that's a whole new level. Are you thinking about any other let's say, objective that this can bring, or result of this open standard RFID?
I mean, it's implicitly included, but like removing vendor login, like not having separate systems that only work with one manufacturer, but like just having the cross compatibility, I think is an important point. But that's by an open standard by definition would be open, of course. But I think that's my main problem with the current system is that the system is locked down.
Yeah. Oh, I forgot we were live on Facebook as well. We have Brett from Facebook. Need to make an app that you can tap the spool and get the information, so you can see how many meters of filament are available before having to connect it before checking. Yeah. So for this part, that's an interesting message, because you can put static information right on the RFID, and you could theoretically rewrite some information on the tag. But in order to do what you're saying, it means that we need to constantly read and write information on the RFID, meaning you calculate how many, or maybe you don't calculate if you write the information. You use a certain amount of filament, and then you have to rewrite on the RFID what is left. And then if you respool something on that same RFID, then you have to change. So right now, the way they do is they just use a static information, which is the core diameter, and then they just calculate. So even if you use on another printer and then you put it back on the Bamboo, then you will still know exactly, well, they will guesstimate how much filament there is. But to do that with the phone, to take something and then do this with the phone, then except having that information dynamic on the RFID, then I'm not too sure how you can actually have that information without using that calculation idea.
Yeah, so one point with like tracking filament usage, the way Bamboo does it is like just remembering somewhere how much filament is left on the spool, but that means you need to store the data somewhere, and they're not storing it on the RFID tags, they're just storing it in the cloud. But that means if you had an open standard, you would. So one option would be storing it on your device, like your phone, but that would mean only your phone knows how much filament is left on your spool, which is not that useful. You usually want it to be synchronized across all devices, and that requires usually some kind of cloud service. And even like if you measure the spool rotations, if you use different printers, you would still need a way to synchronize them, because just from rotations alone, you can know how much filament is actually left on the spool. You can like start guessing the spool is getting empty if it starts spinning faster, because the closer you get to the core, or slower or faster, whatever. That way you could guess if it's near empty, but no exact values. But if you want proper tracking, you would need some basically cloud service. But that is once again difficult, because of course I or you or someone could just start a service, but if that service disappears, everyone would lose their current filament information. That's it would also be it's a difficult thing to decentralize.
Yeah, well, the part I like is that we like, as of today, we don't need to think about all of this, in a way that now people know that they can put a core information in that filament, and then they can come up with like a lot of ideas, right? What if the slicer is connected with the printer, and then they know exactly, and then they record that like somewhere on the slicer, and then they if they recognize the same ID of the tag, then they have that database on that slicer, like you said, or like they will come up with some ideas, because they are able to have access to this information from the spool. And that's what I'm excited, is that once that standard is out, I'm 100% sure over the next half a year or 2 years, we're going to see a lot of things pop up that's going to use these tags. Okay, as always, I'm running very late on the chat, so let me run through everything very quickly. So Brett, any Bexy Bean, thank you for coming. So this is the legendary Nick. I've heard so much. Busy. We're doing some Christmas stuff. Yeah, by the way, happy festival to everyone. Whether it's Christmas, what's the name of the other one? Hanukkah, New Year, all the festivals that are happening nowadays. I'm interested in the new PTG and the copy product. Yes, I'm also interested in copy feedback from all of you guys. Michael V, good to see you again. Is Polymaker developing a product like Toolomer? I don't know what Toolomer is. Sorry, Michael V. I think the CFS does that. It ready how full the spool is with the tags. Yes. Are Polymaker planning on including RFID in their spool? How would that affect the price? Would the purchase absorb the cost, or would it be passed on the consumer? That's a great question. Mr. Balunatic, you have a lot of great questions. I think this question was yours as well. Cost. So will we put RFID on the spool? I don't know yet. I think so, but we need to be sure of what standard we use, and that's the reason we're talking about all of this today, because I don't want to launch something that is either just thought internally, either just blindly following something else. I want to be sure that once we invest into having millions of spools with a tag inside, we don't have a year after, then we have to change everything. So I think the answer is yes. How to do it, I don't know yet. The cost, I don't know also. I don't know how much is a tag. Could be 10 cents, could be $1. I don't think so, but I don't know. But definitely, I don't think, for that part, I don't know. But we'll definitely try to not increase the price of our filament.
Yeah, so I think at the scale of the Polymaker, it will probably be just a few cents per tag, I think, if you order enough. But it also depends on like what exact kind of tag you use, how much storage it's supposed to have, because there are tags with different amounts of storage. Like most often, the size I see the most often is 180 bytes. That's like about 180 characters if you use simple text. But I've also seen some with 400 characters, which are also a few cents. So someone saying NFC tags are about 6 cents. Yeah, so if you order enough, it's mostly a matter of the order quantities. If you order enough, they get really cheap to a few cents.
Yeah, good point. Yeah, so it might be just absorbed by our margin, basically. Pete Savas, thank you for joining. John Stern, Jatin3D. Sorry if I missed any name. I'm trying to go through everything. In order to read and write, you would need a part of the tag that is not encrypted. Yeah, so I don't know anything about this stuff, but the way you're explaining it is really good. I'm glad you are understanding, because I also don't know so much about that technology. Although I did my homework, you know that rabbit hole when you try to understand the technology and then you go like deep and deep and deep and deep.
Yep.
And
I know that very well.
I ended up on a page that was explaining migration of animals that are also using RFID, but at a different scale. They call this like super ultra high frequency or something like this. And anyway, that's the rabbit hole, right? We all know that. Cake himself, I'm out of town now, but I wanted to pop in quickly to say hi. Hey, thank you, Cake himself. Oh, that's Mitch. So Cake himself here, Mitch, from Polar Filament, is the one I had a discussion with, and that introduced me to the work that has been done so far. And I told them on their Discord that I was going to do the live stream as well. If you record a core diameter, you can calculate remaining. Yes. Vasiency. I think there are 3 pools of potential information: material specific, spool specific, then usage. Yeah, that's a good way to put it. So let's try to break down filament information. So what you're saying is there is 3 pools of information: material specific, spool specific, and usage. You didn't give any example for usage. So what would be?
I think, for example, the remaining filament left, because if you have unencrypted NFC tags, I think in theory there would be the option to also write the remaining filament onto the tag. That would, of course, require to not only have a reader in the AMS system or whatever it is, but also a writer. I'm not sure if that increases cost, but it's something to keep in mind. But yeah, that would eliminate the need for a cloud service, of course, to be able to write the usage onto the tag.
Good point. And material certifying, melt flow index, temperature, printing temp. Yeah, that's nice. Yeah, I like when things are organized, and that could be a nice way to organize the filament information, or at least that tag information. The DaVinci printer used to have a way where the filament had memory and would send and receive, which was neat, but I think they went out of business. Yeah, okay. So we used to have something that was pretty dynamic. Okay. Nick is still alive. Hey, Kenneth Chang. Blah, blah, blah. To determine filament remaining, have a connected scale and have something use the weight of the spool and weight of empty spool. Yeah, that could be also, but that involve adding some more hardware in whatever system you have, like a scale. But that's another idea. Xavi, I think the most important part would be chemistry, density, meter. Yeah, I think so. Like density, etc. That would be like material specific. Length would be more spool specific. I got NFC tag about 6 cents. Yeah, and there is some. Okay, so yeah, I almost finished. Then I have some topics. Blah 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 blah. Tulomer is a new filament that claims to be peak alternative. Blah blah. Have recently featured. Oh, okay. I don't know. Like I say many times in my live stream, Michael V, I'm more interested in the feature that people are looking for rather than a particular filament name. Like if you're looking for, I don't know, a very high HDT with, creep resistance and chemical resistance and something, then yeah. But if it's like peak, why would people print with peak? And then we can see if there is some alternative. Cheap NFC tags are horrible rewrite cycles. Have horrible rewrite cycles. Yeah, there you go.
Yeah, that's a problem.
What's cheap
Yeah.
tag? Sorry, go ahead.
Yeah, that's something I didn't know, but I was wondering about how the cycles actually are. I didn't think they are that bad, but yeah, that's probably the reason why, for example, Bamboo doesn't write it to the text, because that sounds like if you want to be able to store the filament usage or remaining filament on a tag, you would probably need very expensive or relatively expensive tags. So yeah, storing it somewhere in the cloud still sounds like the best option to track filament usage.
Yeah. So there is one thing I want you to talk about is the following. So what needs to be standardized? I actually asked the same question to Mitch when we talked. So I'm not going to give his answer, and then I want to see that we are all on the same wavelengths, right? When it comes to this. So what needs to be standardized? What do you guys think? Like, what is important to all agreed on? If one company don't agree, then it doesn't work. I mean, at least it doesn't work for that company. So there's, I think he came up with 4, and I added 1, so we have 5 in total. What needs to be standardized?
Let's see what people think, because I would have a few ideas, but
okay, let's see the chat. You go first. Yes. Filament remaining is the most important. That's not really a standard, I would say. So if your meaning is that the standard would be that everyone needs, yeah, I don't know.
So for the filament tracking, in theory, you would only need the unique ID of the tag. So technically, it doesn't matter what you do with the tag to do the filament tracking. You don't necessarily need information on the tag, just the tag ID.
So I'll come up with one. Where to put the tag on the spool? So that's one. If all the companies are putting tags here and there, one is in the center, one is inside the core, and one is on the very edge, one is on an extra tag that come with the filament. So I think we have to standardize. Otherwise, like AMS, CFS, and all material management system, they wouldn't know where to put the reader. So
Yeah.
they know where is the spool, but where you put your reader, you only have, I think, a couple of centimeters to read. So it has to be placed in the right. So I do think this is important to standardize.
Yeah,
So
I've been also thinking about that. Like, does it make more sense to measure from the outer edge of the spool or to measure from the inner core of the spool? Because, for example, let's imagine an AMS that could take 2 kilogram spools that are really huge. Then it would make more sense to have the distance fixed from the outside because the core will be up much higher, versus on a smaller spool, the core would be lower. And the outside edge, like in a system like the AMS, where the spool rests on its side, that would be easier to standardize if the distance is measured from the outer edge of the spool. But it depends on what or how the spools are held in the AMS.
So Keck himself is, I saw someone was saying, someone in polyfilament is also, someone from in polyfilament is also looking into this as well. So there is interest. So Warpaint and Unicorn, just for your information, the Keck himself, the name on Twitch is polyfilament, is Mitch from polyfilament. And he's the one I talked to, and he shared with me all the work that they have done, just for your information. In the standard, RSA would be optional. Signatures guarantee authenticity. For example, you could prove a tag is a polymaker tag that hasn't been modified. If you modify it, you'd know it has been modified, but you could use it anyway as a non-genuine tag. Yeah, that's also another thing that that Mitch talked about is like security or maybe safety, I don't know, or maybe authenticity. But we haven't talked too much about it. But let's say, so what would be the need for a user? Like, is there an example where if you don't have like a safety system or a security system, then it's bad? It would be bad. What I'm coming
so
up.
I think like,
yeah.
Sorry.
Yeah, go ahead.
Like as someone mentioned, like just fake products. I'm not sure if I saw fake filament, but maybe if you look on some questionable websites, maybe you find some fake filaments, or something that I think you also experienced before. Some websites like Amazon sending people packages that have already been opened. In theory, you could like make a system where you can check if that spool has been at least scanned before, and if that's like an already opened spool that has been repackaged or something like that. But I'm not sure if that's a really important case. But I think the just fake filament, counterfeit is probably the better word. Counterfeit filament would probably the more common one. But I think if you just shop at reliable websites, it's usually not a problem.
Yeah, I haven't seen fake filaments so far, like someone pretending to be another brand or something. At least so far. But yeah, okay, I would understand. There's not enough filament remaining to finish the print. Do you want to continue? Yeah, I would say so. Let me come up with another one that I think englobe what DaVinci is saying. I think the data structure in the tag needs to be standardized. The reason why is we want to make sure that people that are reading and they end up with that block of information, they know exactly how to read it. They know that this is this is that, this is this is that. So I think we should all put the data in the tag in the same way. Whether it's using.
Important.
Yeah, go ahead.
Yeah, that's an important factor. And like that's something I'm not sure about, if you are required to use the blocks or if it's like in theory possible to just store text on the tag, because then you could use a structure like JSON or what, I'm not sure how it's called in English, but like some text format that's standardized. So you don't need to look for certain blocks, but you can just read the whole data and get it as text. And then you have labels for the data, like you have temperature colon and then the temperature, and color colon the color. So it's no guesswork what the data means, but being able to just write a label and the data that belongs to it. And I think that should be possible, but I'm not sure how. I don't know enough about NFC tags or RFID tags to know how that works exactly.
Actually, Mitch explained that on the RFID, and I think I drew something. I followed his instruction and I drew this. Let me see.
In the meantime, question at Mitch. What size of tags are we talking about? Like, I've seen 400 byte tags, and it doesn't need to be JSON. There are like formats that are shorter, like YML, I think is the file format, that only uses that doesn't use braces, that doesn't use quotes, that just has the label, colon, and the value as I described. And I've been trying around a bit with like 400 characters. If you use the 400 byte tag, you could store a reasonable amount of data.
Okay, so Mitch, thank you for the explanation. I hope I'm correct. But what he was explaining is there is 16, not blocks, 16, 16 what? There is 16, there is one thing above block, which was sector. There is 16 sector. Each sector has 4 blocks, and each blocks can contain 16 bytes of information, but one block is used for
probably defining which block it is, I would guess.
Yeah, the last block of each sector contains key information, whatever that means, but at the end we cannot put any information on it. So we end up with 16 times 3 times 16. So we end up with 768 bytes, and the ChatGPT generated text here is 768 bytes, which is basically a character, 768 characters. So this is what you can put on a tag, a 1 kilobyte tag. Yeah, a 1K chip, which I guess is 1024 bytes, and that's the information you can put on it. So it's not a lot. So we need to come up with the next standard, which I will add here, is I think we need to come up with a standardized web API. What do I mean by that? Is you can put any URL, you can link it to any website, your own website, like Polyfilament with their website, Polymaker with their website, etc. We don't need a centralized website, but the API needs to be the same for all of them, which means if a slicer wants to take a profile from our website, it needs to be the same way as taking it from any other website. So yeah, I think we need to standardize this as well. I'm getting late on the chat again. So let me quickly. If there is one thing I miss from the old days, cartridge, how much is left on the spool? Yeah, and I think that can be done with that system. DMAT. All the RFID tag needs is a unique ID code no other spool has. Yeah. All the other variable info will be stored on other device. This allows different companies to create ways to use the ID code without being locked into one standard. This allows companies to create.
But it also means you get nothing at all if you have no Wi-Fi connection. Like some people also have their Bamboo printers offline for security reasons, for example. So we have the idea of like having a system where you can pull additional information of the filament from a cloud or something like that. But like some base information, like the printing temperatures, colors, filament type, should definitely be on the tag. So it still gives you the most important required information even without using the internet. Because it would be really annoying if you can't do anything at all. If the internet is down, then you can't do anything at all.
Yeah. Good. So and actually that's what Mitch said also during our discussion. He said that he would like that system to also be, when I say he is the community that is working on it, but he was summarizing what all the work they have been working on. He was saying that they would like also this to be usable without Wi-Fi for two reasons. For the printers that do not have access to Wi-Fi, like, I don't know, Ender 3 maybe doesn't have access. And reason number two is the same reason why Bamboo released the X1E, is there is some usually professional companies that do not want, or let's say it's not they do not want, but they control a lot the access to internet. And if they have more devices like printers that have access to internet instead of how do you call that, LAN, LAN, local something network,
local area network, yes,
local area network, yeah. So they would use rather this, and then it means that everything needs to be on that network. So I mean, that doesn't mean we cannot use the slicer. Like, let's say, if you need to download a new version of the slicer that has maybe all this information in like a lookup table, but that means that every time there is a new spool on the market, then they have to refresh the new version of the slicer that has that new information. But anyway, that's the reason why we do need as much as we can in that small space there is on the tag, and that's what we're going to talk about as well. Like, what is the must information that would really increase the user experience on the spool. JSON has been proposed, but you have very little memory on the tag, so you'd fill it up too quickly. Blah 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 blah. Correction: info stored on RFID tag would be standard info plus a unique ID code, variable info in store of the tag, external device. Yeah, exactly. Pete Savas, actually, Nick, it might not be a bad idea to have all the brands go to the central website, so there is a single repository. You could leverage the existing independent filament library website for it, and if every manufacturer were to contribute little funding, that's ideal. Whether it's doable, that's the part I don't know. Maybe a standardized API, and then all the filament company, they just, or printer company, anything, they just do their own stuff. They design it, they brand it, they do whatever they want on their website. But you can, or they don't even do a website. It's just they just take it from so it is an idea, Pete. I just don't know whether that's easily implementable to have everyone.
The thing is, if each filament has an ID, nothing stops someone from doing that, because even if you put the URL of the manufacturer on there, no one forces you to go to that URL. You can just go to whatever API you want, and you can start building an API that tries to use all the that contains all filaments. Then you can just reroute your requests that pull the profiles to that website. No one forces you to go to the manufacturer's website. And that's also a point I thought maybe we talk about it later. But if there is a standardized web API for filaments, and every manufacturer has their own API that follows the same format or is the same API standard, then it's super easy to make a website that just pulls the APIs from all the manufacturers, and then you have one website that has all the filament data from all manufacturers, because it can consume the API from each manufacturer as long as they are the same. And that gives manufacturers the advantage of like being independent. They have their API, they manage themselves, and like if they want to shut it down, they can shut it down or do whatever they want to it. And because I think if you want to get manufacturers on board, it's always important to not give them the feeling they are making themselves dependent on someone or something. And if they self-host their API, I think you give them a lot of independence, which probably makes it easier to get them to adopt it.
Yeah. VastCNC, maybe the tag could also have a QR code printed as part of the standard. Yeah, that could be. Maybe the QR code can also be linked to that API.
Yeah, that's an idea I had as well. And I was trying out, you can actually make you can put relatively much information into a QR code if the resolution is good enough. But there are also alternatives to QR codes that have like use colors to store more data. And I definitely think it's a good idea. It would be cool if you don't just have NFC, but also QR codes. Because, for example, on iPhones, it's pretty difficult to use the NFC reader. On an Android phone, you could make a web app or website that can use the NFC reader to read the spool. But on iPhone, you just can't do that because Apple doesn't allow you to use the NFC reader through the website. I'm not sure local apps, you can probably do it, but it's still not really easy. Apple likes to keep it for the Apple Pay and their stuff. But with a QR code, it's pretty easy to do it on any device that has a camera, basically, because all you need is the camera.
I think you will need to combine a locally stored database file with CSV to act as a lookup table and some variable, manufacturer, etc. Yeah, and Mitch told me that was a big discussion that they had on that topic, whether they use local data on the tag or a lookup table, and then you put that lookup table somewhere on the printer, on the slicer, or online, etc. So, but I think at the end it will be a mix of both. This is something I'm opposed to because it defeats the open source decentralized aspect, funneling everyone to a single point where one person is responsible for all RFID. Yeah, I mean, at the end, I think that more or less what Noah said. But if the API is open and standardized, then anyone can do a centralized website in a way that they just they pull everything to their website, and then you can look at all the information at once. But each spool will go to different website depending on the area. Blah 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 blah. Ender 3 v3 has Wi-Fi. Thank you, Dav Galum. Thank you for coming. Ramelane, RAM online. I don't have a TPU profile now, and I must have this info: density, temperature, max, mean, and shrinkage, softening, blah blah blah. I miss this, and I have to use internet, so I would like as much as possible this info for the slicer. Good machine will print instantly. Good if the math is right. Yeah, like we discussed, it's a balance. We don't have that much information that we can put on that tag. Whether we can put a whole profile, I think the answer is no, because a profile would be much more than that. Like when I'm talking about a profile is like, a temperature, standby temperature, temperature of the shell, temperature of the outer shell, temperature of the infield, speed of the infield, speed of the that's way more than this. So
yeah, and you would need different profiles for different printers and different slicers, and you would, if you want to serve like probably 50% of users, you already need like 20 different profiles. So that's not really an option, but like the idea with having a web API that also covers profiles would provide an easy way for the slicer to pull like profiles for your printer and slicer combination. And also, I think it was Ram Online 79 who said it before, sticking to Bamboo with the RFID thing. The problem is Bamboo doesn't want us to stick with their RFID tags because Bamboo does their best to lock everyone out of their RFID. They don't want anyone to use their RFID except for them. So if you want to develop an open standard, I don't think going by Bamboo's standards is a good idea because they don't want it either. The best thing would be if at some point Bamboo adapts a new standard, if there is one. Like I think if everyone used the same RFID standard at some point, Bamboo would probably also adopt it. Or maybe not. Who knows?
But they might. I'm not sure if they would adopt the tag, because I know very few, if no one, using bamboo filament in a non-bamboo printer. So from that perspective, most likely their RFID will only be read on the MS, but they may update the firmware so that the reader can also read the open system. So they could
that
read
would
the
be
open
good.
system. Whether they would change the tag, I'm not sure. But so we had, like I said, there was 5 things that needed to be standardized. I remember the other one here, but what was the 5th one? What needs to be standardized? Let me check my notes with
Yeah.
the note I had with. Let me see.
I mean, what NFC tag or what tag type is used? So, what frequency, what the technical specs of
Oh,
the tag
yeah,
itself, I think, should probably be standardized, because otherwise,
yes,
you would need different readers.
that's exactly the one I missed. I have heard you, but I think you talked about the hardware. But basically, we need to standardize the hardware
Yeah.
and protocol. So
Yeah.
most important is the protocol, I think. Whether the tag is not exactly the same, I'm guessing as long as it has the same data structure and it can be read by the same protocol, then
Yeah.
it's fine. So I did some work also, and I think they are using this one at the moment, the first one. And they have some discussion, if I remember well, to move to NFC, which again, I'm not super familiar with all of this, but there is apparently different type of protocol to read the information, and we have to standardize that. Otherwise, you cannot read it, or you have, I don't know, maybe a reader can read different protocol that I don't know. But yeah, so we have to standardize the hardware
Yeah.
protocol. Blah blah blah.
Yeah. So, the difference between NFC and RFID, like NFC is based on RFID as far as I know. And the main difference is that NFC has a shorter distance. Like NFC, you can read it from a few centimeters, while RFID, as you described, some RFID systems you can read from 10 meters away. But
Yeah.
like, I think for the purposes of spools, probably NFC would also be fine, but I'm not sure like if it's an advantage over using regular RFID. But yeah, that's something that needs to be specified. Do we use NFC? Do we use RFID? What frequency?
Yeah.
Yes.
So that's very important. And the last one is, I'm not too sure I understood properly what Minch meant by this. I think I have understood, but he talked about standardizing how compliant tags are by amount of information. So if if you have access to that amount of information in the tag, then you would be class 1 tag. If you had access to that amount plus more, you are class 2 tag. And then if you have even more information, then you're class 3. I give you an example. If you have printing temperature, bed temperature, retraction setting, what filament it is, what diameter, like something like this, then you are compliant class 1. So this is class 1. If you have less than that, then you're not even classified. You're not compliant in the open system. And now you add URL, that access to profiles, I don't know, hex code, TDs, blah 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 blah. Then you are class 2. So people know that this is a class 2 RFID. So you have access to this. And class 3 is you get the live diameter of everything, like Prusa does, and I didn't know actually, but I think Polar Filament are doing this as well. The live diameter, roundness, the exact weight that was on the spool, blah 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 blah. Then you are class 3. So I would understand the compliant level, like a class 1. So 1. The part I'm not too sure I understand is why there is so many classes. Why not you are compliant or you're not compliant? Why do we need to have different levels? So that's the part I'm still unsure of, why we needed the levels. So
So I think if we do like the system with having a standardized API, I don't really see the point of that as well, because If the standard only has like really the basic data that you really need, and also have the API for the additional info, then you don't need to have different levels for the tags, because the baseline is so small that it's easy to implement, and you don't need really big tags or something like that. And how much additional data you supply is just based on your API.
Well, the part I would see is useful, but I would disagree that it's something that should be in an open system, is the marketing. Like, it would be good from a marketing perspective to say, hey, I am class 3 tags, so that's my differentiation point. I have more. But from an open system point of view, I don't think we should integrate the marketing part. So and again, I don't think that was Mitch's idea, and I should have asked more questions, but we were running a little bit out of time, and I didn't want to take too much time from him. But that's the part I still don't know, why he wanted, why they had ideas of having class. The data compliance, I think, is a good idea. I think we should define, you have a data structure, but we should define what is compliant, what is not compliant.
Yes.
And like a minimum, let's call it a minimum amount of data. If you don't have that amount of data, you cannot. Yeah, that's not a,
Yeah, technically it's the same as point 3 though, because if you define data structure, that's also either you are compliant to the defined data structure or you are not.
Yeah.
So it's basically 3 and 5 are the same point technically.
I don't know, because you can define a structure, but you can make that structure, but your data is empty basically, or you only have the diameter and the rest is empty. So you follow the structure, the diameter is at the right place in that structure, but then the rest is empty. So
yeah, but usually you can, if you define data structures like I don't want to go into detail that much, but if you define a data model, you usually can say that's a required value, that's an optional value, and you can define one data structure that has required fields and it has optional fields, and then you can easily say it's compliant or it's not compliant, because if it's missing an required field, then it no longer matches the given data structure. For example, JSON schema would be something that does this, or in XML, that's a technology where you usually define a structure and then you can check if a document follows the structure or not. And that's why it's basically the same point. Either it's valid and compliant or not.
Okay, so where was I here? The 3 events standardization is the best idea. If it's open source, you do have the choice of website, but also give people a place to start. Yes. But another option would be to run a Kickstarter to create an open source reader that could work with an open standard and a user created tag that we could self-deploy, and then use that with an interface plugin to all the major slicer, so that we have an independent brand agnostic solution. So for me, the most important is the data access, how and the protocol. So basically what is on the screen right now, how the printer manufacturer decide to implement their reader, or what reader they use, how the phone app decide to use that, etc. For me, that's not really part of that standard. So let me read again, maybe I don't understand the idea. Another option would be to run a Kickstarter to create an open source reader. So that's a hardware, right? Open source hardware, a reader that could work with an open standard. Yeah. So if we know the protocol that a tag is using and we know the data that are inside, do we have to standardize the reader, or it could be whatever you want?
Yeah, I think if the data is standardized and we use a common tag format, you could probably read it with any reader that uses the same technology, and potentially even with your phone or other hardware, especially if we add on top of the RFID, we also add the QR code. Then you can even use even more devices to scan it. And I think it's more important to just make it easy to read it, because then you don't need to worry about the hardware that much. If it's so complex that you need specific hardware, then that's that's destined to fail. So it needs to be easy to read.
Yeah, like we mentioned at the beginning, it's that standard needs to be easily implemented and useful. If it's if it's super useful and easily implemented, then it will organically be used, because we cannot force anyone to use it, but
Yeah.
it can be organically used. Trying to create standards usually create format wars where nobody wins except the last man standing. Yeah, I mean that's that's that that's the challenge with any standard, right? Like the master spool, right? We have a core size. Bamboo has a core size. Eason has a core size. Senlu has a core size. Everyone has their standard, and everyone launched their standard. So the RFID right now, the good thing is there is no open RFID. There is the Bamboo RFID, but they launch it as in we don't want to create a standard. That's our stuff. From what I understand, because apparently it's not, you cannot really use it rather than their printer. So as of today, my understanding is there is no open standard. So whatever is going to be released first, if it's good, then I don't see any reason that others would come up with their standard. The only reason other company would come with another standard, it means the standard that we would come up together as a community was not good for them. So that's why it's good to include everyone, right? This is a first discussion. There was a lot of discussion made by the Open RFID community on Discord, and actually that brings me to another topic. We'll come back and clean up a little bit the data, but how do you write this? Committee. So I had an idea of having a committee that would decide on what the standard is, and that would decide on what do we need to change, what do we need to implement, etc., etc. The committee would be the following. There would be 3 parts. Number 1, 3D printing companies. That would be part 1. So maybe let me write it this way. So there will be 3 parts in that committee. 3D printing companies, industry or like a technical, let me just, independent technical experts, and user independent user representatives. And here how it would break down. So 3D printing company, pretty straightforward, is any active company in our industry. So let's put Polar Filament, Creality, Bamboo Lab, Polymaker, Spool Stock, any 3D printing companies, blah, 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 HueForge, blah, 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 blah. Okay, so that would be 3D printing company. On the other side, we'll have independent expert. So independent expert, maybe Noah is not so independent anymore. So
technically
independent, but so basically an RFID technology expert, let's say. And we wouldn't have so maybe 5 to 6 expert maximum. And here 5 to 6 expert as well. And here no limit. I will explain. Expert. So maybe there is a definition of a 3D printing company. Like you need to have maybe a certain size. Like if you are a one-man show with 2 printers in your garage, and you sell 2 products per quarter, then maybe is not defined as somehow we'll have to define some type of definition of what a 3D printing company is. So need to define it, but it's no limit. 5 to 6 expert, maybe a polymer expert, maybe a printer hardware expert, and maybe a software expert, and maybe a data analytic. I have no idea what type of expertise, but independent expertise that will have to choose what would make sense. And then independent user representative. So we're talking about, for example, a large corporate additive manufacturing director, for example, and then a small Etsy entrepreneur, and then a consumer, just a consumer, and then I don't know, a large print farm, and blah, blah, blah. 5 to 6 segment representative, and we can define what are these representative, but 5 to 6, and then here no limit. And how we would take decision is basically if so these guys here have a veto. So these 5 to 6 experts and 5 to 6 segment representative, they have a veto, meaning that if one of them say no, then we have to go back into the discussion and see how we can solve it.
That usually means that nothing ever changes, though.
Come again?
That usually means that nothing will ever change, though, because regardless of what you do, there's usually at least one that has a problem with it. So, like, voting usually works better, just in my experience.
And here it's just the first idea, right?
Yeah.
Here we would have like, if I don't know, 80% says yes, then it's good. Then it's good. So that's my first idea. I'm not saying it's the best idea, but that's my first idea. I don't know how well it can be implemented. I don't know, etc. But yeah, at least we start from somewhere. So because we need somehow to have we need to have a way to define that standard, and you have two ways. One is you don't control anything, you just let it go, and then the community will think about something. Sometimes it will branch out, people disagree, and then you have two standards, and then blah 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 blah. And the other way is you try to be a bit more corporate. I know some people don't, not comfortable with corporate things, but that's another way to go. You organize a little bit more. Why I prefer the organization? I prefer the organization because we have not have any open RFID system at the moment, or at least not that has been implemented at a large scale, and it's quite a heavy investment for all the companies to commit to that standard. And for me, there is more chance to have that standard by implementing a more corporate approach, because the other side means I'm just afraid that it will be very hard for us to organically arrive at a single standard for all the different filament manufacturers. So I don't have like strong argument. It's just a little bit of a feeling, a little bit of some arguments, but I just wanted to explain what is in my mind, and get some of your ideas. Maybe Noah, you can start. So you were mentioning that the veto is maybe a little bit hard.
Yeah. So the thing with a standard is you can just put out a standard, but the worth of a standard is how many people actually are behind it and support it. Because that makes, so I think the first part with the companies on board and the committee is probably the most important part, because they are the ones that will use the tags, and in order to not get a format war where everyone has their own format, you need to get as many people on board as possible. And once you have like a majority on board, then that's the point where the standard actually starts to matter, because then you can like softly push people into using the standard, because most companies are using it. If there's a standard and just one company uses it, you can't really convince people to use it as well. So that's the hardest point. Is the most difficult point is like getting companies behind it. But once you have companies behind it, that's where standard can become really strong and useful.
So for you, if you had to come up with ideas, you would change this by having also a percentage here, for example. You would think it
So,
would work better.
or for example, something, I'm not sure if that's like, that's just an idea of, for example, saying like companies of a given size have a veto. So like the really big ones have a veto, because that's not the most consumer friendly probably. And usually I'm not a fan of like corporates having too much power, but in something like that, if a big company drops out of the standard or doesn't join it at all because because they don't want others to tell them what to use, um, it's just, yeah, it's important to have the companies on board, and giving them a veto makes it easier for them to decide to join the standard if they know that nothing that's a disadvantage for them will come from the standard, because if that was the case, they could veto it.
Mm.
But if too many people have a veto power, that's the point I was bringing before. If everyone has a veto power, you will never get any change, because even if it's a tiny change and you have like 50 people or entities on board, there will probably be at least one that doesn't like it, and then it's also impossible to make progress. So it's always difficult to, in a committee like that, to distribute the power correctly, to both make it stable, because you also don't want it to change all the time. You also want to make it attractive for the companies to join the committee, because if they have a veto, they can be sure that, as I said, nothing bad happens with the standard. Yeah, but you also don't want everyone to change everything at all the time. Yeah, it's a difficult balance. I
Yeah.
would say.
Do you think? I mean, from a objective point of view, it's hard for me to be objective, but from an objective point of view, I would agree that it might be more interesting to have. I mean, ideally, like super objective, super ideal is we just take some type of market share of each company and then we do a weighted a weighted average vote, right? That's ideally, right? But definitely not possible. Nobody is
Yeah.
going to share their their market share, their sales, etc. um, how to I think I like the idea of large company have veto. The part I don't like, or it's not I don't like, is I don't know, is that how do you define a large company? I mean,
That's the point, yeah.
popular company, or people that put their sales, or we have another committee that agree on on who is large company or something. So that makes it quite hard. But I do understand what you mean. That let's say, I don't know, let's say Ponymaker in this case don't like the standard, but all the other brand of filaments, and let's say, I mean, there's thousands of brand, right? So when you look at only brand, and the majority of brand they agree, and then let's say I don't know, Ponymaker, Sunlu, Eason, the Bamboo Lab don't agree, but 80% say yes. Then you end up with a standard that went through, but the majority of the spool on the market won't use it. So how? So that's why I understand your meaning behind this. I
Yeah.
just don't know how to how to implement it. Or do you think companies will be open-minded enough to understand large and small, and or they would not be open-minded, and they will start arguing with each other? No, I'm also a large company or something.
Yeah,
So that's
so something you could do that some like political institutions have, that like the existing board can vote if they agree a new member to join or not, but that would require the companies to be like open-minded enough to accept new companies that are technically their competitors in many cases.
mm,
And you would have to expect them to be fair. If there's a new filament manufacturer that's actually relatively big, that they agree to letting them join. That would be a point, because yeah, I'm not sure how fair the companies would be in that regard, but if you could assume they are fair in that regard, it would be a good system of just
mm.
having the committee vote on joints or not. Yeah, but
Let's read a little bit. Maybe there will be some ideas. Um, I don't remember where was I. So yeah, if you don't mind copy pasting if I missed your message, but I will start by here. Sales volume, yeah, Pete, that's ideal. That's ideal, but that's not possible. People are not going to share. Companies are not going to share their sales. That's for sure. Why would Bamboo want to allow for competitors to communicate with their machine? Not even from a cynical perspective. Many companies want to set user. Yeah, so they don't have to. What we're talking about here is an open RFID tag, which means that spool are going to come with a tag, and you have access to the information if you want. So that's what we are referring to. Warpaint and Unicorn, put out a general questionnaire and see how the stuff lands. Yeah, that's another way. We could also have the market decided on whether it's large or small. We can also just ask people. But then we end up what I jokingly say, right? We have another committee that is decided. Perhaps if you can at least get company to agree to provide a few common elements on their filament tag using YMI brand.
Yeah,
tag.
that's the YAML. I think the letters are changed. It's just another data format, basically using simple text to represent data structures. The example I sent you, that's YAML. If you scroll up in Discord, the example of how you could put data on the tag, that's the format they are talking about.
Okay. Then how the rest of the information can be under their own design, as long as this can be read in a standardized fashion. Blah. Yeah. So this I agree.
That's the whole point.
Yeah. So we need everyone to agree, and how to do that. That's what we're trying to figure out. My idea is this, but it could happen that you end up with a standard that pass where the majority of the product will not follow the standard, because with that idea that is written on screen, you can end up with the larger company from a market share perspective say no, but overall 80% of the companies say yes. Then and what we're trying to brainstorm right now is how to avoid that. And one idea is, option one is, the companies are going to be open enough to define themselves as large or small. And maybe if you want to join that committee, you have to join with large or small. And then if you want to become large, then it has to go through a vote again, something like this. So yeah, we have to think about it. So let me write that option one. So option one, it starts with large and small companies, a group of companies. So let's say, I don't know, 5 to 6 companies. And so it starts with this. And it should be fine to start with this, because companies that would be really involved in open source and open system should be open-minded enough to define themselves large or small. And then from there, if new company, then I'm coding. So if new company, yeah, that is easiest. Then like some type of we go through the same vote basically. Then vote if yes or no, and at the same time large or small. Okay, it's just one option that works, right? So you start with 5 to 6 company, let's say Portafilament, Creality, Bamboo Lab, Polymaker, and then Spoolstock come and wants to enter. Then these 4 company say yes, you are very welcome, and you will be considered as I don't know, small. And then and if they agree, then great, then you are inside, and you don't have the veto, and they are fine with it. And then HughForge come, and then it's the same. So that's one way, one option. Yes. Convince them. Yeah, that's we're trying to come up with something fair, basically.
We just go by their follower count on, I don't know, Facebook, Twitter, Blue Sky, YouTube, and who has the most followers gets to join the main
Yeah.
committee.
This is a beginning to sound like NATO.
Yeah, that's basically it. It's a
Yes.
committee as well. And I also mentioned it's like similar to how political organs like NATO, EU work. And it's
Yeah.
also like something you often see, like when new countries want to join the EU, it's always difficult because everyone needs to agree. And if some country doesn't want to have them in the EU, they can't join and stuff like that. So yeah, that's a
Yeah.
difficult thing. And I'm not sure if we will get a conclusive answer today, but still
Yeah.
interesting
At
to talk
least
about it.
we'll hopefully have a couple of ideas that can be discussed further.
Yeah.
Uh, how many times print fail and user can blame everyone while it can be fixed in easy setting. Okay, Pete Savas has some thoughts. If this is going to work, at some point, all the filament companies are going to have to decide to compromise and work for the betterment of the industry and consumer and their own self-interest. Yeah, absolutely. I mean, that's going to be basically the discussion within the committee, right? The reason why we want the company to be part of the discussion is because we want their self-interest to be taken into account. Otherwise, we may end up with zero company that follow. But if everyone can openly talk about it, I mean, we're not talking about something that will, at least in my opinion, will drastically change. For filament company, I guess it's a little bit easier. For hardware company, I can think of, for example, Bamboo Lab saying no because maybe the protocol they are using right now is not the same, and we might go back to a discussion and figure out that actually we can also use your protocol that doesn't change much, so that everyone is happy, and then we just go with it. But the everyone is happy, that's the part that needs some rules because it's very hard. If that doesn't happen, it will never work. Yeah, I'm hoping we can. For me, we definitely need a committee, and we need a committee that is well designed, and we need some rules. I know there may be some people that believe more into the other side where we just go organic. There is no rules. It's an open community. Everyone talk. It's possible, but I don't know if companies are going to follow it. I don't know. So I would rather go this way. A little out of my league, but what about getting input from the big print farm people like yeah, exactly. So that's here, large print farm. So for example, Slant 3D is a great idea. Maybe Slant 3D can be one of the representative here that is able to vote on that standard. So the three parties, 3D printing company, as in 3D printer manufacturers, filament manufacturers, maybe 3D printing apps and stuff like this. And then users, as in large print farm, consumers, entrepreneurs, and large corporate, etc. So that's and then industry technical expert in the in RFID, for example, in that case. What I'm talking about is company adoption and buy-in. How is open better than close? How is open better than close? How is open in which perspective? Because that question could be yeah, but let me just give one answer. So an open standard that is followed is basically the advantage of a closed system for everyone. So that would be my shortest answer, but I don't know exactly in which perspective you ask. But open is closed for everyone. So that's the close is good because it has a standard, but it's only for that closed system. Open, if it has a standard the same way close has, then it's the same as close, but for everyone. Yeah, I guess I repeat the same answer, but that's the simple answer. Yeah. How would you answer it, Noah?
Yeah, I'm also not really clear about what they mean with open versus closed. Like, do they mean the technical system or do they mean the committee? Because that's the two ways I could interpret it. Like for the technical system, I don't see any advantage of closing it because closing a system just means fewer people can use it. For the committee, though, yeah, that's what we are talking about. How open is the committee supposed to be? Because for something like that, having too many people in a committee is bad, and having too few people in the committee is bad. And where do you draw the line, and who gets how much power in such a committee? Because that's both in politics and technology often the reason why things fail, because either too many or too few people have a say on it.
Yeah. Get the EU to pass a law that all filament has to follow the standard. Yeah, that's I mean, that you're joking, but that's another way that some company has go. They have lobbying, and then
USB has started as a standard that a few companies, like I think Intel and a few other companies, Intel, IBM, Microsoft, and a few others, put their heads together, developed a new connector standard called USB. And nowadays, the EU has adopted USB-C as a standard, and manufacturers have to use USB-C because the EU agreed on that. And that also started as a standard. A few companies have developed together as an alliance.
If 80% back the idea of a common standard and the user can add their own tags to non-standardized spools, then does it actually matter? It does matter, because 80% of the 3D printing companies say yes does not mean 80% of the product will follow the standard. You can end up with 80% say yes, and less than 5% of the product on the market is actually that standard. So that means every user would have to do their own tag for everything, basically. So that's the part that we're trying to solve, is we want that 80% that says yes to represent 80% of the product on the market. And in order to do that, one solution is that large company can have a veto, meaning that
it basically
can have a veto.
Puts you to almost 100%. Like, at least if you have a veto system, that means basically 100% of the committee agrees, at least, because if at least one doesn't agree and veto it, then the change can't pass. So that still wouldn't represent all of the market, but at least all of the committee.
Yeah, and the reason we don't put a veto to all of them, because there's no limit here, is that if everyone has a veto, then might be super, super hard to pass anything. But if only a large company has a veto, then maybe that makes it easier. At least that's the idea so far. You team up with Creality, so that's a good start. HughForge is closed. Bamboo will listen. So that come back to the first idea, right? There is 5 to 6 company, and then from there we standardize everything, and then more company will join, and it will be easier, because when they join, there will be a vote, basically. I think the project should be funded by the manufacturers that are interested in a standard but deployed independently. Balloonatic, that's a really great message, because so here's how I think it. I want you to do this at the beginning. The problem is no independent party will be driven enough to make it happen. So that's the problem. Make it happen to the scale we're talking about. The most interest will be to actual 3D printing company. And that's the reason they are part of the committee, because they are the one that will drive the project. I mean, except if you really come up with a group of, a few people that are driven enough and can make that standard happen, then yes. But at the end of the day, for me, it has to be driven also by the manufacturers. Otherwise, I don't think it will ever happen, or it may take years to happen. It took so long for features to get added to open software standard when major application developers have a large voice. Yeah, so I think that's what Noah was highlighting, is that if too many people has a veto, then how do you do? If Polymaker always say no at everything, then nothing's happened, basically. So now the question is, what are other options that could make it doable, or at least more realistic? Have to go early. Thank you, the three heaven. Have a good rest of your weekend. Close usually locks you into the one making the tag. Open a call for us. Yeah. This is just like FIDO and Wi-Fi alliance, but you will need all three industry to be involved: hardware, slicer, and consumables. Yeah, I agree.
Yeah.
Sideline. Nice to see you here, Sideline. Pete Savas, whatever standard that is eventually developed will need to be openly and freely available to reader and firmware developers as well. For instance, it can be implemented in Clipper or Marlin. It won't matter how much work is done in developing a standard. Yeah, yeah. And Clipper, yeah, it's a good. That's a good point actually. Voron, Clipper, whatever open community, are they considered here, or are they considered here?
And one thing I want to add on that to just make it clear, the standard is supposed to be open. Everyone can read and use the standard. You don't need to be part of the committee to use the standard. Everyone can just use it if they want to. And that's the goal, that as many people or companies use it as possible, regardless of whether or not they are part of the committee. The point of a committee like that is to make sure the standard like gets developed and gets adopted, because if you have like these companies together and they decide together on if that standard is good or not, if all companies agree on the standard, then you have a lot of companies and big companies that start using it, and then it makes sense for other companies to use it as well, even if they are not part of the committee. It's just yeah, the committee is just there to manage the standard and make sure it's a good standard basically, but anyone can use it.
Vasiency, mainly from the perspective of Prusa Creative and Bamboo, how would you sell them on joining an open standard over their own closed standard for their own filament and hardware? Well, Prusa and Creality easy, they don't have it. So I mean, maybe Creality just had one RFID, but they don't have implemented something to the point where they cannot go back or something. Bamboo is a different story, and Bamboo might more be organic, meaning that they will have to see an interest. But like I was mentioning, I don't think they will need to implement the standard on their spool, because their spool is used on their printer. You would rarely see a Bamboo spool on another printer than a Bamboo. So the only thing that would need to maybe the interest is that, okay, I can update my reader, not even from a hardware perspective. I'm pretty sure the reader can read whatever standard the community will come up with, and they can change that by interest of having more filament being used in their printer. So yeah, I don't see this as a challenge. I think it makes sense for company to decide the standard because they are making the things for the machine. Yeah, I think they should be involved. Sideline, no matter, all parties will need to see there's an ROI implementing the process. Yes. Peekaboo. The problem with open source is that there are so many voices that influence it that it takes a long time to get anywhere. Closed only has to answer to one boss. Yeah. I mean, there is pros and cons to both open and closed, right? For that system, I see more pros to being open than closed. Spoolman for Clipper, yes. The one that made the open AMS, right? I'm a fan of delicious flavor. Oh, good. I was going to suggest independent user rate, but it's already there. Yeah. I think the three parts are important. 3D printing company needs to be involved. Users need to be involved, and people that know what they're talking about when it comes to this standard needs to be involved. Because we might not know that. Let's say an RFID expert says, "Hey, I know you guys are not very involved, but RFID is going to disappear. There is that new technology that is taking over everything, blah, 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 blah." And that's good to know, right? And we might not know it because we wouldn't have that RFID expert. Balloonik, to start, you need to get a group of people to
poll, I think. Survey poll. To ask them.
To poll, okay. Poll all the filament manufacturers and printer manufacturers to see if they would be willing or interested in having a standard, as right now are talking in a bubble. As right now we're talking in a bubble, I'm not sure, because it's an open live stream, and Mitch has an open Discord, and Portal Filament has talked to a lot of company, and we also have talked with a lot of companies. So I wouldn't say we're in a bubble. Quite the opposite, I would say. Quite the opposite.
Yeah, but I think it still would be a good approach to usually with standards you make a draft. Even if we don't have a committee yet, it would make sense to draft the standard, what we are planning to do, what the advantages would be, how you would implement it, and then you can just send that to the companies and poll them what they think about it. Do they think they like the standard, or would they change something about it? And you could send it to all the different groups to get feedback on the standard. And either everyone thinks it's a great standard, then it would be pretty easy to get them on board. Or if everyone dislikes stuff about a standard, you make a new draft and try again.
Yeah, I agree. And actually, that's exactly my next step. So what I shared on the Discord, where all the people are working on this, I told them I have some vision, I have some ideas, and then I told them I'm going to make a live stream to bounce some ideas with the community, and then I want to put a report together. That report is going to suggest a standard, is going to suggest how to the workflow, like the committee idea that I shared with you, what needs to be standardized, already an idea of what standards I think is good, what data needs to be, how the API needs to work, etc. So I would like to put that report together in the next couple of days. I'm not talking about in the next month, right? By next week. And then I want to share that report on that group, gather some feedback, and share the report also with on live stream, the community, on that group, and then optimize that report. And once we optimize it, then I go back to the different companies that we have been talking to, and we present a more defined report. And then they might say, oh, great, yeah, that's a good idea, we'll join, and the workflow works great for us, we'll be part of the 3D printing companies, etc. We have a few ideas on what users could be representative, and maybe some other company will say, no, that doesn't work for us because this and this. And maybe that's where things start a little bit to get better optimized. So it's a little bit some of the next step that I'm thinking about. Companies are necessary because consumers don't have access to production data and metrics. Yeah. Formulate a working group and start working on a draft and see where it goes from there. Yeah, that's already happening, Mr. Baronik. I'm actually I'm late to the party in some ways, right? A group has already been formed on GitHub, on Discord. They have already started working on a draft, basically the draft that I shared at the beginning of the stream. So everything is already going on. So right now, I'm just trying to enlarge even more the group of people that are working on this, and trying to go to a bit more defined point. Make the standard questionnaire as well, and yeah and nay, and comment on each point. Yes. Taking action like that would certainly get things moving on this issue. Yeah, I agree, 100% agree. DMAT, first, more printer companies will have to put readers on their printers that will read all RFID tags. Then more filament company will start putting RFID. I think is which way would it go? I think we should start to have RFID on the spool, and then more hardware will want to use that and start implementing some readers, rather than printers put some reader out there, but there is no tag to read.
Yeah.
So I think I would say it's the other way around, but that's just a guess. I think all filament manufacturers see the benefit, as Bamboo has proven the concept. I feel they are unsure the best path without burning dollars on a method. Yeah, that's a good point. Sideline. I think the proof of concept was. I mean, I'm not calling Bamboo a proof of concept, but I think they have shown that that having better connection between the material and the hardware creates a better user experience overall. I wasn't here when you shared the drafts already. Yeah, no worries. Everything is recorded if you are interested, but it's basically, I can send you the link. That's basically what they came up with so far. Next one. I was not sharing the right one. The reader can be third party that can be implemented to the software. Yes. Awesome. So, as always, these live stream are amazing, but I already take you guys 2 hours of your time and also Noah. So, what I'm going to do is I may do another one because I wanted to go even more into details. I already started opening my Excel to start recording all the data. So maybe we'll do that in the next one. Let me clean up a little bit what we talked today. I will clean it up and make it easier so that in the next live stream, I will take 10 minutes to just present the report from today. And then in the next live stream, we'll go a little bit more into detail so that we can really start drawing a very nice report. And then we can share with the community Mitch has started to prepare. Sounds good, Noah?
Yeah, sounds great. It was a fun live stream. It was really cool discussing with you and with chat. Many interesting comments, and people are pointing out important things. And it sounds like a pretty big task to make a standard like that, but if it actually works and we get companies on board, that would be super cool, I think. And mainly a win for the user in the end, but hopefully also a win for the companies. But I think most importantly for the users, that would be really great for everyone, I think.
Oh, absolutely. And win for users is win for companies.
Yes, it's
for
exactly.
Sure. Yeah. Great. Then, thanks again, everyone. Thanks, Noah. And we'll definitely share when will be the next live stream so that we can continue this discussion. Okay. Wish you guys a good weekend. Have a good weekend, Noah.
You too. Goodbye.
Thank you. Bye. Bye, guys.